What would you do if you found your mother's passport with a completely different name on it? I found exactly that while packing her house after the funeral. An expired passport photo, unmistakably her face, but the name printed underneath read Elena Voss, not the name I'd called her my entire 32 years of existence. My hands were shaking too hard to even set it down properly on the dusty bedroom floor. I checked the issue date twice, certain I'd misread something obvious. It was issued 4 years before I was born, in a country I'd never once heard my mother mention throughout my entire life. Expired now for over 2 decades, but somehow never discarded despite my mother's otherwise ruthless habit of throwing away anything even slightly outdated or unnecessary from her deliberately organized home. I called my aunt immediately, the only surviving relative who might actually know something concrete about my mother's mysterious life before apparently becoming the woman I'd always known completely. Her hesitation on the phone lasted uncomfortably long before she finally admitted, quietly, that my mother had legally changed her name entirely, at exactly 23 years old, right before meeting my father. Why would she do that? I demanded, gripping that expired passport so tightly the edges actually bent slightly beneath my trembling fingers. My aunt sighed heavily, the exhausted sigh of someone finally releasing a secret they'd carried unwillingly for decades. She was running from someone dangerous back home, she said carefully. I promised her I'd never explain further unless absolutely necessary. This felt, undeniably, like exactly that necessary moment had genuinely arrived. I pressed harder, and my aunt finally revealed my mother had actually fled an abusive first marriage entirely, faking her own disappearance convincingly enough that her legal husband back then still believed, decades later, that she'd simply drowned during a boating accident nobody had ever actually properly investigated. My mother apparently had orchestrated her own presumed death carefully, changed her identity completely through underground contacts, and rebuilt an entirely new life 3 states away, specifically to escape a man who'd nearly killed her multiple times previously, according to my aunt's careful, hesitant, clearly still frightened explanation given decades after the actual danger had presumably passed. Is he still alive? I asked, suddenly terrified of an answer I genuinely hadn't considered needing to actually worry about until this exact moment arrived unexpectedly into my otherwise ordinary Tuesday afternoon. My aunt didn't know for certain, admitting she'd deliberately avoided any contact whatsoever with that entire previous life for over 3 decades now, exactly as my mother had originally requested. I hired a private investigator specifically to determine whether this man remained a genuine threat, uncertain whether uncovering more information might actually endanger myself or simply provide overdue closure regarding a mother I'd apparently never fully known, despite 32 years of believing our relationship was completely, thoroughly transparent between us throughout my entire childhood and adulthood. 3 weeks later, the investigator confirmed the man had actually died 8 years earlier, natural causes, meaning my mother's carefully constructed secret identity had technically remained unnecessary for nearly a decade before her own recent passing, though she'd apparently never learned this crucial information herself before dying peacefully, still believing danger somehow remained realistically possible. I felt an overwhelming, complicated grief discovering she'd spent her final years unnecessarily frightened, protecting a secret identity that genuinely no longer served any actual protective purpose whatsoever during that specific extended period of time before her own death occurred completely unexpectedly. Some fears apparently simply outlived the actual danger that originally created them entirely. I buried her under her real name, Elena Voss, alongside a small marker acknowledging the name she'd chosen to build an entire safe life around for over 3 decades of genuine, hard-won peace and happiness. Do you think she should have told me the truth while she was still alive, or was protecting me right until the end? Comment told me or protected me below, and subscribe for more true family secret stories.